Hello everyone, in this video you will learn how to implement open authentication security for your declarative agents for Microsoft 365 Copilot. This allows you to build an agent that calls your RESTful API using OAuth 2.0 with an identity provider of your choice. Now, if you choose Entra ID as your identity provider, then the users can log in using the same credentials that they use to access Copilot. This video is part 3 of a series. In part 1, my colleague Bob German and I show you all the different ways you can authenticate your declarative agent. It's worth checking out if you haven't already. We will put the link in the description. In part 2, we showed you how to enable single sign-on for your agent. Now, if you want to build a declarative agent that calls OpenAuth secured API on behalf of the end user, then you've come to the right place. So let's not waste any time. Here is Bob showing you and demonstrating the steps needed to implement this particular flow.
Thanks, Rabia. I want to start with an existing declarative agent called Trey Genie, which helps consultants working for Trey Research, a hypothetical consulting company, with their projects and billing. What makes the agent possible is a REST API that can access the current projects, billing, and assignments. Notice that there's a /me path, and that when I use it, I can list my projects, and it somehow thinks I'm a fictitious user called Avery Howard. That's because we haven't added any authentication yet, and the API has hard-coded Avery as the current user for testing purposes. So now let's set up OAuth so that the user can log in and we know who they are and can show them their actual projects. Now we could do this manually, and we have a hands-on lab for that. There's a link in the show notes. But I'm feeling lazy and wanting to show you the easier path. And since I'm using Entra ID, I can get Teams Toolkit to do all the setup for me. So let me show you how to do that, and then Rabia will show you what Teams Toolkit did to make it work. The first thing you need to do, and I'm going to go right into the lab here and show you. The first thing you need to do is to create what's called an Azure Active Directory manifest file. Azure Active Directory is the old name for Entra ID. And this is going to tell Teams Toolkit exactly what type of application it should register. So it has all the registration details inside of this JSON file. So go ahead and save that into the project. And we'll check that one off. And the next thing we need to do is edit a file called teamsapp.local.yml. And this is the instructions to Teams Toolkit when it sets up your application. Version 1.5 is what the previous lab had, but we had to update the schema and the version number so that it could do the app registration. So we're now on version 1.7 of that file. And next we're going to add some instructions to have it register the Entra ID application. So we're just pasting some information under the provision section of the file, which is what happens when you hit F5, or part of what happens. And we've just added a step for creating the Entra ID app and another one for saving the details to our environment file automatically. The next step is to update that Entra ID application, and we're going to have it generate an app secret or client secret and some other details that happen after the registration time. So we'll just paste that into place. And there was a schema change around how the output files work. So we've just got to go in and quickly change the output path to use the new syntax for version 1.7. So we'll do that quickly, and it should fix the red squiggly line. Should go away for us, which is always good. All right. Finally, because our code is also going to need access to those environment variables, we need to tell Teams Toolkit to expose them. So this is where Teams Toolkit will write some values into our env.local file. And so that goes down here at the bottom of the file. And as I say, you don't have to remember all this. I just want to explain the principles a little bit, and then you can follow the lab instructions, which are referenced from the show notes to get the exact details. On this next exercise, I'm going to make the same changes basically to another file. This one is not teamsapp.local.yml. YAML. This is just plain old Teams app.yaml. And this one is used when you provision into Azure instead of running locally. I'm not going to be doing that here in this video, but it's just prudent to go ahead and fix it at this time. So another thing we need to add here is instructions to put the app inside the Teams developer portal vault. Now, since we're handling an app secret here, we can't put that in the manifest or anywhere where it would be shared. So the vault is going to safely store that information for us, and Teams Toolkit will put that in. So now we've told Teams Toolkit to provision everything. The next step is to tell Copilot that it needs to authenticate. So to do this, I'm going to go up to the app package and open up the Open API definition file. And this is all kind of a standard. This is not a Microsoft specific thing, but notice that I'm going to add a security schema in explaining to Copilot that there is an OAuth authentication that's needed. And then what I need to do is I need to add inside of every path that I've defined, I need to add that so that I'm telling Copilot, no matter which one of these API methods that I call, I always need to use the auth code. Now, if I wanted to have some of them be anonymous or use a different scheme, I could certainly do that right there. The next step then is to update the plugin file. So this file contains all the instructions, again, to Copilot, but everything that's not in that standard Open API definition file. So I'm going to change it from no auth to OAuth, and I'm going to reference that location in the Teams Developer Portal Vault so that Copilot can get to the app secret and do the OAuth flow that it needs to do. So at this point, Copilot knows how to log the user in and supply an access token, but there's no security unless we actually check the access token inside of our API. So that's the next thing that I'm going to do is the next exercise of the lab is update the application code. Now, unfortunately, Microsoft does not provide a library for validating access tokens in Node.js, and this is a Node application. There are detailed instructions on how to do this by writing your own code, and I'll reference those in the show notes. But to save you the trouble, my colleague Waldeck Mastercards has written this library called JWT Validate. I just want to point out that this is community supported. It's not officially from Microsoft, and you need to use it at your own risk. Or you can follow the official instructions and write your own validation code. Now I'm going to go ahead and install Waldeck's npm package, npm install JWT Validate, and that will load all of Waldeck's code and the library into place. So at this point, I need to update my own application code to use the library. And the app includes a service called the identity service, which is currently hard-coded to always assume that the user is Avery Howard, who is a user that's in part of the test data. So let me just show you the updates here. I'm going to go ahead and import Waldeck's library and then add a member to my class to store a reference to an instance of that library, because we want to let the library do caching of the private keys that are used to validate the token, and we only want to have one copy of the library, one instance running, so that that caching will work. So now inside the class, we're going to check and see if we have a validator, and if we don't, we're going to go ahead and new that up. Next, we're going to set the validation options, which tells the library that we want it to check the tenant, the audience, the issuer, and the scope to make sure all those things, as well as the digital signature for our token, are valid. There's details inside the comments, by the way. If you have a multi-tenant application, you need to do this slightly differently. And then we'll validate the token, and the library will throw an exception if the validation fails, and the code will return a 401 access denied. If the validation succeeds, we'll save away the user ID, username, and user email and return those to the requesting Azure function. So now let's go back to the lab and finish things off. We need to restart the app, but before we do that, I'm going to increment the manifest version number. This just sort of makes sure that Copilot is going to load a fresh version of the application. It's sometimes worse without this, but it is a good practice. So I'll go ahead and increment that and start the application fresh. And we need to stop and start the application so that we run that F5 logic, which will provision the application, registered in the Teams developer portal, and all those good things. So here we are inside of Copilot, and let me go into the Tray Genie, and I'll ask it what projects I'm assigned to. And it's going to get permission to call the API because it knows it's a new version of the app. And now there's a sign-on button. So I'm already signed into Entra ID, so I'm not going to see anything inside the pop-up, but there will be a pop-up which will run the auth code flow and log me in, and I'm logged in as Amber, so this is working correct. I'm very happy. I'm going to send some good feedback because it correctly identified me as Amber. Now, Amber's not on any projects, so I'll go ahead and ask it to assign Amber to, or assign me to a project. And it knows who I am as the logged in user, and sure enough, it went ahead and assigned Amber to the project. So now let me turn it back over to Rabia, who will show you what Teams Toolkit did when it set up that application.
Of course, Bob. So there are two things Teams Toolkit has done behind the scenes. It has done the app registration in Entra ID portal as well as the Vault creation in the Teams developer portal. Let me take you through it. First, we'll start with the Entra ID portal. In the Entra ID portal, if you go to app registration, you will see that the Tray Research OAuth app is already registered without you going in and manually updating or configuring it. You can see that the application ID URI is specified, the scope for accessing the API is specified. If you go to the secrets and certificates, you can see that there is already a client secret generated for you. Now, all this information is pre-generated using Teams Toolkit the moment you press F5. And then if you go to the Teams developer portal, you will see that in tools under OAuth client registration, this particular Tray Research OAuth AED is also registered in a Vault. So you get a registration ID, and all other information is pre-configured, including the OAuth settings. Here there is the client ID, secret, authorization endpoint, token endpoint, etc., including the scope. So all this behind the scenes is done for you using the Teams Toolkit.
If you'd like to try this hands-on, please check out our Copilot Camp Lab E6A, which walks you through all these steps that you saw. Or if you prefer a manual setup, maybe you want to use a different identity provider, then you'll want Lab E6B. Links to both are in the show notes. If you like this video, please give us a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our Microsoft 365 developer videos. Thanks.